Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Local Soccer Show. Steve was unable to make it today, so I'll be taking his place. Before we begin today's episode, a special thank you to Evangelista Sports, our main partner in this adventure. They have supported us from day one. We thank them so much for their support. And please, as soccer season is coming to an end for the winter, preparations are coming in order for the summer. Go to Evangelista Sports for all your soccer needs, whether it would be uniforms, shoes, socks, equipment, you name it, they have it. And go visit their flagship store in Saint Laurent, Little Italy. It's the best soccer store in Canada. Thank you once again to Evangelista Sports. So, everyone, today we're going to be talking about an important topic, the lack of sports infrastructure in the greater Montreal area. It's been a big problem for many years, and we're really happy to have a special guest to talk about this in terms of how projects are funding, what can we do as a community to get things forward and make things better for soccer, especially given that we have 5 months of winter in Quebec. So we'll introduce shortly our guest right after this little video. Everyone, it gives me a great honor and a privilege to welcome to the Local Soccer Show Senator Tony Loffreda. Buonasera, Senator.
Buonasera. Thank you. I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on our show. We really appreciate it. Senator, the Local Soccer Show was born from the passion that Steve and I had to make local soccer better by speaking to great guests more knowledgeable than we are on a variety of issues. We go in depth in debate with the sole purpose of sharing the knowledge and finding ways to make things better, whether it be for the kids, the coaches, the clubs, the admins who run the clubs in the background. And sometimes we even discuss things for the federation and also for Canada soccer as a whole. So today, Senator, we wanted to talk about an important issue regarding the lack of sports infrastructure in the greater Montreal area. As I mentioned earlier, given that we live in Quebec 5 months of winter, having indoor facilities to play sports, I believe is vital for the mental and physical health of the community. We can all agree exercise is very important to one's overall health, promoting a sense of community. It brings people together. And I find, having two young children myself, and in this digital age that we're living in, getting the kids off the screens and going out to play is even more important, more than ever. So anyway, Senator, obviously, given our mutual passion for soccer and the fact it's the most played sport in Canada, more than hockey, we believe, we should have more indoor turf fields to play on. And it's not only for soccer, you can also use them for many other sports. And one of the ways we have seen how vital these things are to the community is when Catalonia complex closed in Lachine, it had a really negative impact in the community. And it wasn't only for the kids, there's also many leagues of even adults that were playing sports in that complex, and they no longer had an option of where to play. And more recently, unfortunately, the Concordia Stinger Dome in NDG collapsed, and there was also an incident at the Golf UFO with a tear in their roof, which all added to make the situation even worse. It's been very difficult for even clubs to find time to let their kids play some games on the turf in the winter. And the demand has been very, very high, and the cost is getting even more and more expensive as well, given the limited supply of turf fields. So, without further ado, who better to speak with about this to you, Senator, given your background? Just in case some of the folks watching never heard of you, I highly doubt it. But anyway, You're the first Canadian-born senator of Italian descent, a proud Montrealer. We know you love sports and you're an enthusiast of many sports. And you also work on several finance and budget committees, so on and so forth. So before we delve into the issue, just curious on your overall thoughts. I'm sure you've talked about this with many other people other than myself. Do you believe there is a lack of investment in indoor sports infrastructure in the Greater Montreal area?
Well, first of all, thank you. There should be a lot more sports facilities, especially for soccer, which is a very popular sport. As you mentioned, the most popular and amongst youth with the most players. You know, it brings me back to the late 90s when we looked at the Catalonia Sportsplex. And I remember Roberto Catalogna at the time had approached me. He was one of the first sports complex indoor sports complex. And I was at the bank at the time. And we looked into the project and we believed in it. It was not very easy to put forward and get it approved because there wasn't many indoor sports complexes like the Catalonia Soccerplex. So even the people at the bank, the credit people were asking, is this going to work? Is there a need for it? How will it work? And finally, it was a huge success. I think what it comes down to is really believing in your own projects, getting the right people. It's always about people, getting the right people involved, engaged, the right people that you need. Diplomacy, you need economic diplomacy, commercial diplomacy, both at all levels of government. And you need, I always say it, wealth is created by the entrepreneur. Wealth is created by the people that invest. It's not created by governments. So you would need people that say, like Catalonia at the time, the Catalonia brothers had approached me. They believed in their project. They believed that they wanted to put together a soccer complex. And from there, you approach the banks for financing and you move it forward. And the rest is history. We've seen the success that Catalonia Sportsplex has had. What followed, many sports complexes followed. There is one on Papineau Street where Concordia, which I was, as you know, many years part of the Concordia regional soccer team. And I was president of the Montreal Concordia Elite Soccer Club for many years. And Concordia plays there on Papineau. And I think it's in high demand. It's very successful. They have their head office there. And we need more sports complexes such as those. Not easy, though, because it comes with a cost. I mean, a high cost. And government budgets at this point in time, governments are looking after COVID. They're looking for fiscal responsibility. They're looking for, projects they can invest in, but the funds are limited. So it's not easy. So you need commercial diplomacy, economic diplomacy. You've got to get the right people involved. You've got to get the right people around the table. And you've got to present, everybody has an opinion, but you have to present good judgment, bringing the project forward. And good judgment is based on experience, is based on knowledge, is based on facts, based on numbers. And you need all that. You have to bring all that together. And you have to get it right the first time. It's not that you can do 12 presentations. You have to do one presentation. It's got to be complete. It's got to be the people you are presenting to have to know and have to leave the meeting saying, hey, they know what they're talking about. I have confidence in these people. It's going to work. And you've got to get the numbers behind everything. Saying how many soccer players are there? How many complexes right now are functioning in Quebec or in Montreal? How many do we need? How many teams? So you've got to bring all those facts together. And, all government investment needs private investment also at this point in time. The government won't say, hey, we'll do a sports complex. They've done one at Concordia on Papineau Street. In Montreal, I'm talking about. So right now, I would suggest your best approach or your best plan would be to get individual investment, get business people behind the project saying, here, name a sports complex after them, leave a legacy. And, like Catalonia Sports Complex, I'm using Catalonia. You mentioned it. Catalonia is a good example. At the time, the Catalonia Sports Complex, Soccerplex, was a huge success. And too bad it's closed at this point in time for various reasons. But I think that you have to use that approach at this point in time. It's the best approach to have the quickest results. Because if you look at government and the layers of government and look at the various government funding that's available, it'll take a long time to get that approved, especially now we're in the midst of elections, federally, provincially also. We know that soon there'll be elections. And municipal too. Our mayor just, she announced that she won't be seeking another term. So she won't make any commitments for the next government, for the next mayor. So I think it's important at this point in time, what I would suggest you do, you get that private investment going, get the individuals that love soccer, want to leave a legacy and want to put a project together for the good of the community, for the good of the city, for the good of the country. And I think it'll pay off big time. But you have to be able to do that at this point in time.
But Senator, forgive me for being cynical, but when it would be a community good like a sports complex, especially after what happened at Catalonia that it closed, wouldn't it be in the public interest to have it owned and operated by a local municipality, so you won't have a situation like happened in Catalonia where it got demolished to build condos?
Well, no, but this is why I did say you need individuals that want to leave a legacy, a sports complex in their name, and manage it, or have people manage it, and for their legacy. I think that's the right way, the right approach at this point in time. Because if you look at government funding at this point in time, and I believe that the indoor sports complexes should be a priority when it comes to sports, when it comes to recreation, when it comes to youth development, entertainment. They should be. But when it comes to government funding at this point in time, in the year 2025, it is limited. And you've got to look at those budgets. Sit down with your municipal councilors. Get the right people around the table. Sit down with the mayor. Start from the top. Sit down with the mayor and saying, this is what we'd like to do. How do we go about it? How much can you fund us or help us? But I think you need the right people behind it, because to say, hey, the city will do 100% financing, or the province will do 100% financing, or the federal government for that matter, I don't think that will be that is the solution at this point in time. The solution at this point in time is getting the right entrepreneur, the right families behind it, and saying, hey, they're for it, let's do it. And I think there's, you've got to look into many areas. I mean, approach the people, the soccer world, approach the MLS, approach the CF Montreal, approach the Canadian Professional Soccer League, approach the women's leagues, and say, hey, we don't have enough indoor soccer complexes. How can we go about it to build them? Who do we approach? Who should we talk to? Who should we speak to? So that's the diplomacy you need to do at this point in time. Because to just go to the government and saying, hey, we need funding, it won't work. The government, too, needs to see what's behind it. Who's behind it? It's all about people. Who is behind the project? How will they make it work? Why will it work? Why do we need it? How much money do we need? When do we need it for? Who's building the project? So these are all details that are extremely, extremely important, because there's no sense in talking about building the soccer complexes if the planning is not adequately done. And once the planning is adequately done, you've got the right people behind the projects, and then you could approach government, see if there is funding, and then approach the banks also. I remember with the Catalonia Sports Complex at the time, he approached me. I remember Credit telling me, are you nuts? There's no sports complexes, indoor sports complexes in Quebec. They don't work. They use the gyms. And it did work. It did work. We believed in the project. And I think even Roberto Catalonia, Luciano Catalonia will tell you that if it did work, it was thanks to what we did, what the bank did at the time, to our team, that we put forward a project, we financed it, we put it forward. And it's unfortunate what happened there, but that doesn't mean every business ends up the same way. I mean, it could have been a business that would have been there for a long time and not worry about the condo projects, not worry more about, hey, the soccer complex, the legacy, it's there to stay. So I'm not saying that, in their situation, we were lucky that they had it for so long, because it was in a prime location for condos, for condominiums, for senior residences. It was the location was prime, but and we're lucky they did want to do it for so long, and they kept it for so long. But not every piece of land, every piece of recreational field or soccer field ends up being a condominium project. I think in the future we have to get the right people around the table, and make it happen.
So, Senator, you mentioned earlier about having the right people, and I totally agree with you. I also believe where there's a will, there's a way. We've seen some contradictions in terms of things where sometimes the government does say, oh, we're limited with our funds, but then for certain projects, things get approved. So I can understand why some people feel a little bit cynical when it comes to the politicians. And I include myself in that category, because I did see some times where they often think more short term when it comes to certain things, instead of taking like a long-term view. So sometimes you need to make decisions in life that might have a bit of risk, but not because it's something has to have a return on investment after 1 or 2 years. You got to think maybe 5 years from now, 10 years from now, this could be a big benefit, and it'll take longer to do a return. So the reason I'm mentioning this, because just to make you aware, and maybe you already know this already, from my own research, I know that in LaSalle, it's been over 10 years. They're trying to build a dome. They've submitted a project, like you said. I know the people there. They contacted the right people to ask these questions you said earlier. From my understanding, it's now at the downtown municipality at head office. They have to analyze it, and maybe, like you said, an upcoming election is coming, so maybe they're stalling. They're taking their time to make a decision. Dollar des Ormeaux Soccer Club was in the process of seeking funding to build a permanent facility instead of a dome. Still nothing has happened. And more recently, like you mentioned, CF Montreal. So one thing I heard was that CF Montreal wanted to build a dome at the Centre Nutrilait, and the city refused. And I believe it was because the residents nearby would believe it would be an eyesore to have a dome in the winter. But I mean, if it's only just for the winter and then you take it down, I didn't see it as the end of the world. But if a club like CF Montreal is unable to get a dome, considering how much money they've invested in soccer in this province all these years, it's very discouraging, Senator, when you hear these things. And that's where I say, is there maybe no political will or appetite for governments to want to do these things? Because for whatever reason, they're not on.
Well, I'm with respect to CF Montreal, where they wanted to put the project together, maybe the residents around the area weren't in favor of it, and they put a lot of pressure. So I'm not too familiar with what happened there.
Yeah.
And you mentioned it. But I think, every level of government looks out for the common good, the good of their people, satisfy their electoral base, and satisfy the people that they're serving. I mean, government is there for the people, not people for the government, right? We have to remember that government is there for the people, not people for the government. So the fact that they're there for the people, it's what the people want, right? And I think we shouldn't give up on that. You shouldn't give up on the fact that, but you have to do it the proper way. You have to get the proper people behind the project. You have to get the proper investments, and saying, hey, we already have X number of dollars as investment. We need a little bit of help, a fund, a program, a special grant somewhere, and this project will work, and it'll employ so many people. It will result in so many young soccer players playing in the complex. It will result in so much money, and I think at this point in time, the private investment is extremely important when it comes to government because, like I said, government funds at this point, it's not easy to obtain. Everybody's talking about fiscal responsibility. I mean, we've seen the pressure with the $800 million spent on bike paths over the last 10 years. I believe that's the number, right?
And that's the same number to repair the roof.
Yeah, that's right.
Big goal.
Exactly. Yeah. So we've seen the public pressure put on the municipal government saying, hey, these are big numbers. It's not acceptable. So the municipal government has to be more fiscally responsible. I believe that the people are demanding that. The people were furious when they saw that $800 million for over 10 years for bike paths, for bicycle paths that are creating more pollution because there's one lane for cars, one lane for bicycles, and the cars are all in a row. And
you can't use them in the winter.
And you can't use them in the winter. And the bicycle paths, you can't use them in the winter. And there's no bicycles on the paths. But it creates more traffic, more pollution, and it's not achieving the objectives it set out to achieve. Their project with a huge investment. So that and the Big O too. I mean, the Big O. We had asked for the World Cup to come to Montreal. We had asked for. I was the president at the time, and then when I went to the Senate, I resigned. I resigned from the 21 boards. I resigned from being president of the World Cup committee, even though we had helped as a team to bring the World Cup to Canada. But I resigned from the World Cup committee in Montreal, and I realized afterwards that hey, the project's been abandoned. We were demanding a small amount for the Big O roof. We weren't demanding anywhere close to what's being invested now. And it would have been very profitable. We had external consultants confirm that. And I believe it would, it's going to happen in Canada. Why not Montreal, right? So I think those are important issues that have to be looked at, that have to be planned properly, but you need a team. You need a team. You need a team of professionals. You need a team of high-level business people that want to push the project forward. And once you get that team together, you need proper planning. You have to approach the banks at the same time as the government and saying, hey, here's our project. And important to do it properly the first time. I say that because trust is the currency of every relationship. And so the people you're presenting it to have to trust you. And in order for them to trust you, you have to do it properly the first time. They have to know that there's the right people behind the project. It's going to happen. It's going to happen the right way. And they're going to push it forward the way it should be pushed forward. And because we need it. You have to show the need. You have to show that Montreal needs it. Quebec needs it. The soccer community needs it. You have to show that. Important. Very important to show the need. And once the need is there, the purpose is there, the objective is there, and there hopefully the private investment comes in and the government will have no choice but to follow.
So if owning a sports complex is really profitable, you would imagine an entrepreneur would have built their own by now. So I'm assuming the reason why no one did what the Catalonia family did is because maybe today it's just too expensive to buy the land and build the building and manage it and then rent it out, and eventually you recover the investment that you put in it. But I always thought an entrepreneur will always jump on board and do something if they see that they can make a return on their investment. Do you think it just become too expensive for someone to do it privately on their own, hence your idea of this partnership private with the government?
Well, there's no magic formula or magic wand. It could be a PPP. Only the government. It's very difficult, like I said, because of the funding requirements at this point in time and because of the fact that budgets are limited, my understanding. I think what's important too, also for the entrepreneur, is where do you have the land? It doesn't necessarily have to be. It could be a destination where it could be where maybe a condominium project won't be as profitable as it should be in that area or that environment. And therefore, the soccer complex could be built and become a destination for the soccer players and for the soccer community. I mean, I'm not saying it has to be built at a prime street corner where obviously, right, if the entrepreneur, it's opportunity cost. If the entrepreneur looks at a prime street corner, well, building a soccer complex there is not exactly optimal investment for his dollar, because he can do a condominium project and make a lot more money. And as I said, wealth is always created by the entrepreneur, and the entrepreneur has to optimize his investment. So you've got to look, all that has to be part of the plan. You've got to look at a piece of land that's maybe a little more remote, a destination for the soccer players, a little more affordable to build there. And I've been all over I've seen many statements all over many statements for the soccer complexes, but many soccer complexes around the world. And I've seen stadiums that have been built for billions, and I've seen stadiums that have been built for a few million. So we need something that's affordable in the right area, even though it's a destination area and not a prime piece of land or property, but something that we can use, the soccer community can use, and it's important.
So an idea I had, and I wanted to run it by you, given you know a lot more about this stuff than I do, and to alleviate my concern of a Catalonia happening again in the future, would it be possible for the government to provide a piece of land to build a sports complex, so the entrepreneur does not own the land and nor has to buy it? It's provided like a lease with no charge whatsoever. The entrepreneur builds the complex, owns and operates it, but the land belongs to the city. So you alleviate the pressure of the entrepreneur having to go get funding or whatever to buy the land, so that he doesn't own the land, so they can never build something on it without the blessing of the municipality. And all they have to do is build the building and operate it, and you make your lease for whatever, 25 years, like they do sometimes with hockey arenas and things like that. And I was thinking, it might sound absurd, just brainstorming something that came up in my mind now, to see if something like that would be feasible. And as you said, not a prime piece of land, a land where, not far away, but you know what I mean. It's not on a main street, a remote area. People are going to have to drive there to bring their kids, or even adults go play at this complex. But at least you're not stressing the entrepreneur to have to buy the land. Would that be feasible or no?
Everything's possible, right? It all depends on your plan, depends on the people behind it, depends on your projections. I never seen bad projections. All the projections are fine, they're dandy. The viability, sustainability of the project has to be viable. You have to show that it's viable in the long run, long term. And you said it before, you can't just look at the short term, you have to look at the long term.
Yes.
And this is what we senators do. We take the long term view. The short term view is taken by the members of parliament, the House of Commons. In the House of Commons, we're members of parliament too. The parliament is the House of Commons and the Senate, but the House of Commons, they have to get elected. So the view has to be shorter term, because if they don't get elected, well, it's fine taking a long-term view, but they're not going to be there to benefit from it. Yeah. And this is where we come in the Senate, where we take a longer term view and certain that it's good for Canada on the long term. But everything's possible. Okay. It's just a matter of getting the right people there, getting some ideas forward, putting forward 2 or 3 or 4 ideas and saying, okay, which one is better? Which one works best? What can be accomplished in a time frame that's reasonable? Because even on Papineau, the sports complex, the soccer complex that was built, the Concordia Sports Complex, I remember being on that board, and it was built years and years and years later. And it took many years to build. So you'd like to move a little quicker and say, okay, let's get the right people around the table and and move it as quickly as possible. Because if it takes 4 to 5 years, well then, in the meantime, there's no sports complexes, there's no soccer complexes, and the sport is growing. The players are growing, the sport is growing. There's more and more soccer players out there, men, women, boys, girls. I think there's a need. There's a need. But, I said budgets are limited. We're going into elections at all 3 levels of government. But it might be an opportunity, getting the right people around the table and saying, hey, given that there is an election, this project will get you a lot more votes. So I like to be an optimist. I like to look always at the optimistic side of things. And maybe that's a way to look at it and saying, hey, if this project could bring you a lot more votes, it's something maybe we can put forward. I mean, I remember this, and I'm going back to Catalonia. Was a piece of land there. I remember they had purchased it and they put together the sports complex, and the condominium projects at the time weren't as fashionable or as profitable as today. But there was options. They could have built an old residence home, which were coming into fashion, very popular. They could have did a lot more with that land. But they believed in soccer. They believed in the soccerplex. They believed in youth and empowerment and legacy. And what happened. But the legacy was still there. They had a great soccer complex for many, many years that the West Island, not only the West Island, all of Montreal, all of Quebec was served very well through it. And I think it's a matter of looking at that. And also going to see, take, for example, going and see the record or what's going on with the soccer complex on Papineau, the Concordia Soccer Complex. How many teams use it? How many kids use it? How often is it used? How profitable is it? What's happening there? And showing those numbers and saying, hey, look what we've got here. Look how sustainable, profitable, viable it is. And we can make this happen here and find a piece of land. And, so there's a lot of work involved. But you'd have to do it one step at a time. There's no shortcuts. It's always about people, getting the right people. It's about the plan. You can never plan enough. The planning is essential. And a lot of people look towards government and say, hey, government built. You've got to bring the government. The government is there for the people, not people for the government. You have to bring the government a solution, saying, here's the solution. I've got finance. I've got private investment. I've got financing. Is there a grant? Is there some funding I can use? Is there a little push? We need a little push to get over the line. May it be by some land, may it be by a grant, may it be by some program. And so those are issues that have to be tackled. And they have to be tackled promptly, wisely, and on a timely basis. Like I said, promptly on a timely basis. So important issues can't be neglected.
No, absolutely. So you keep repeating, and I agree with you, having the right people. When you say ask for grants, look what programs, who's the primary person that should be doing that? Would it be someone from the club that wants to build a facility, or should it be the municipality representative, the mayor of a certain city, who then knocks on the door of the federal and provincial governments to get their assistance?
Well, no, you need one voice, right? And you put a leader in charge of the project, and you plan it accordingly. And the leader in charge of the project, he should be the one moving it forward, right? With all levels of government. And then once for the municipal government, there's a huge advantage if you have the right people. And I talk about people because it's always about the people. It's always about the people. And
100%.
And yes, because the people will bring you the investments, will bring you the investors, will attract the levels of government. So that's important. And, you can't have government approaching government for funding. You need investment. You need actual investors, entrepreneurs. I'll say, hey, we're ready to invest here, and we're ready to make it happen.
Absolutely. So before ending, Sam, first of all, thank you so much for your wonderful insights. I do agree with you. Having a proper project and having the right people push it forward is definitely key, especially when it comes to the amount of funding you're looking for. the more funding you need, the more you need to be ready. So hopefully that is the message that could be passed on, because the issue is very important to many of us in the soccer community. And not only that, Senators, even flag football, that will be an Olympic sport in the future. There's going to be more and more people wanting to play flag football, and they can also use an indoor facility to do their training and to help develop the future flag football players for Team Canada. So it's not only a soccer issue, it's an issue for many other sports as well. So I just want
I
sorry, go
agree.
ahead.
I agree. You've got flag football, you've got soccer, you've got any sport that's played indoor on turf. The indoor sports complex could be a facility that can be used. And Canada, has made huge investments in sports. So there's no reason that those investments cannot continue. And we have great entrepreneurs in Montreal, in Quebec, in Canada that have made minor, average, and major investments in sports. So it's finding those entrepreneurs that want to leave the legacy, that want to make it happen, and that are willing to push projects forward. And collaboration. I didn't mention collaboration, but collaboration is key. Collaboration between your leaders, between the government, between the levels of government, and between the soccer communities. And I discussed a few soccer communities, the professional teams, the non-professional teams, and making that happen. And everybody wins. Everybody wins. So listen, I wish you luck on the project. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure and a passion to talk sports, to talk soccer, and thank you for having me. Thank you for
thank you for being on the local soccer show. Really appreciate your time, and we also hope with the 2026 World Cup, it'll give a boost to the sport and maybe help move things along, because we're starting to get a little bit impatient. So thanks again, Senator, for being on the show. We really appreciate your wonderful insights and your time today. And stay on. We'll just have an outro video, and then we'll talk to you offline. Thanks again, everyone. Please don't forget, subscribe to the local soccer show. Share with your friends. We want to keep growing the community and share the wonderful insights of all the amazing guests we had. Thanks, and see you next time.